report here.
All right. Good morning, friends. Guess we can begin meeting for worship now with some music from Lynn, I think. Thank you, Lynn. Do we have any announcements this morning?
This is sort of blending over into the joys and concerns. I just wanted to tell you that today is Norma's 89th birthday. And she also told me earlier this week that she is going to the doctor this week and is hoping to be released so that she can work her way back into her usual busy schedule. But I'm sure she would still appreciate thoughts and prayers.
Hearing no further announcements, do we have joys and concerns?
I had a great joy yesterday. I was able to travel and see Drake in his um, saxophone quartet win gold at a contest, and they'll now move on to the state.
Well, I have a prayer request. I mean, it's an update in some ways. I had a bad feeling this week, and so I called my son-in-law, Michael, who didn't answer, but he sent a text later about Laura and said things are really not good. So, and I had noticed shortly after that all the kids posted pictures of them and their mom on their Facebook page. So you may remember that she's fought and survived breast cancer. She fought and survived colon cancer and now has bone cancer. So I'm not hearing much, which I don't expect to at this point, as I think the end is for her on this earth is very near. And so could especially remember her and the family. The kids are very distraught.
Some of you have known Marilyn Tucker from Plainfield Friends, and she slipped away from us on must have been Friday night overnight. She's been on hospice care, and it's as you can imagine in our smaller meetings, losing people who do have had really significant roles and some of those kinds of things is difficult. So folks have thankfully had times to be with her and to say goodbye and all of that over the last several months. But I think there's some people, really feeling that today. So anyway, let you know that.
Because of the cold weather, homeless shelters in and around Indianapolis are full and overflowing. Food pantries, the demand is beyond what some of them can provide. So this morning I am thankful for those that operate those places, homeless shelters, those people that donate money to make their operation possible, and for the people that have the need for them.
As always, we have much to be mindful of and thankful for. Encourage everyone to keep those in our prayers that have been mentioned. We're joined this morning by Western Yearly Meeting General Superintendent Shawn McConaughey, who will be our worship leader this morning and will speak out of the silence as he feels led.
Good morning, friends. It's good to be with you on this February Fool's Day. I always celebrate them all the other months because they never see it coming. If you just wait till April, everyone knows somehow I get suspected of those kinds of things. But anyway, happy February 1st. I really enjoyed the first half hour with you all today. I really enjoyed being able to hear people's sharing about Old Testament stories, and that was really encouraging. And it also just made me even fonder of all of you and of this kind of unique and important thing that you have here online. And sometimes I know that it's not as satisfactory as you would like because you don't get to see people in person as much, or maybe for some of you it's more satisfactory that way. I don't know, but I really have appreciated and loved learning from you all about how this goes, and so it was great to be here with you. People have been asking, what do we do in such trying times as we find ourselves in? And some of you alluded to this already this morning. How is it that we respond? We have homeless shelters that are overflowing and all kinds of particular issues that we're really not sure what to do. How do we protect the vulnerable? How do we keep our own hearts from being crushed? What could I even do? I mean, what can little me do as the forces at work seem really big and kind of overwhelming? And of course, there's some maybe obvious good answers. We pray. God listens and cares about each of us on the earth, everyone. We call out to God. Another good answer is that we rest. We have to find balance and self-care. And it's easy to get to get overwhelmed sometimes. And we worship together. Those are some things that we do that help us find balance and direction and purpose, recentering. But we might feel like we want or even need to do something else because we recognize that our own neighborhoods are at risk. My sense of things, which I recognize is not always a trustworthy measure of things, is not that we feel overwhelmed by doing too much, maybe watching too much television, but most of us are not exhausted by taking to the streets too many days in a row, or because we're facing down scared and angry people on the edge of violence. My guess is that many of us feel exhausted because we're not doing something about it. We're not engaged, and that feels frustrating and helpless. Or maybe that's just me that feels that way. I don't know. So if it's only me, bear with me. Feel free to unmute and answer this question. What might be some of the reasons that we are not as involved as much as we'd like to be in the situations that we're seeing in our country? Not to suggest that none of you are involved, but what would be some of the reasons, simple reasons why we might not be as involved?
It's not here.
It's not here, right? Right. It's a long way away.
I don't matter enough.
Ah,
Enough.
I don't matter enough. Mm-hmm. What else?
Fear.
Fear. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you feel like you might say the wrong thing or go too far out in one direction, carried by your feelings.
Yeah.
And of course, you might get very seriously hurt or otherwise.
Yeah. There's fear involved there. What else?
Not knowing what to do.
Yeah. Where do I start even? What do I do? Maybe I feel in the minority in my circles or in some of those things. Maybe I don't feel like my beliefs or my views would be warranted or heard. Maybe it feels too political somehow, and don't want to be too political. I appreciated the question this morning, the West Newton question about an Old Testament passage and what it might mean to us today. And one I've been thinking about is in Exodus, and somebody else talked about, a couple of people talked about Moses, I guess, but it's in Exodus chapter 4. And this is a continuation of the burning bush story in chapter from chapter 3, where Moses, of course, encounters God speaking to him through a burning bush, a bush that doesn't get consumed by the flames. And in this, God expresses his concern for the children of Israel who are suffering at the hands of Pharaoh. God instructs Moses to go lead the captives out of Egypt. The passage is much longer than that, but that's the crux of it. He says, Moses, it's yours to go do. And at least more than once, Moses debates God using all the arguments about why he's not the best one to do the job. Mostly he argues, no one will believe me that you told me to do this. Who's going to believe this? God says, I gave you the sign of this bush, and I will stretch out my hand to convince both the Egyptians and my Jewish children that I'm God. God gives these promises, but Moses continues on, and he just says, I just don't think they're going to believe me. Maybe he's saying, this just might be too political. Maybe he's saying, I don't know where to start. I'm afraid. I think that's what he's really saying. I'm afraid. He says, God, have you really thought this through? Let's you and I come up with a different plan, involve someone else. We sometimes feel like maybe somebody else could do it better than us. And that's true sometimes. And so maybe this is a little bit similar about how we feel about the situations we find ourselves in today. Big, overwhelming, out of our league, frightening. Surely someone else can do this, right? How would I have any bearing on the immigration issue or in the conflicts in our nation or on the homelessness or our shrinking denomination or whatever issue it is that you lay awake at night thinking about? In Moses' case, we're talking about leading maybe as many as 2 or 3 million people out of Egypt. It's a lot. We don't know the complete accuracy of this number, but even if it's only a symbolic number, it is meant to represent a lot of people, a big movement, a big activity. Where does someone even start with the logistics of that? I mean, how much mac and cheese do we need to buy? Maybe we'll call it Manaroni and cheese. Anyway, that's a bad Children of Israel joke. But we can often relate to Moses. And chapter 4 starts this way. Then Moses answered, but suppose they don't believe me or that they don't listen to me, but say, the Lord did not appear to you. The Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? And he said, a staff. And God said, throw it on the ground. So he threw the staff on the ground and it became a snake. And Moses drew back from it. Then the Lord said to Moses, reach out your hand and seize it by the tail. So he reached out his hand and grasped it, and it became a staff in his hand once again, so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their ancestors, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. What's in your hand? Well, a walking stick. A plain old walking stick that God uses to help everyone, including Moses, believe. Now, that stick, it wasn't a sword, right? And it wasn't made of gold, and it didn't sing. It didn't do some of the things that we think about when we think about sticks with power. But it would become a real symbol of God's provision. Of course, it would be a way to try to convince Pharaoh, but it would also be used to part the Red Sea and hit a rock to drink or to bring about water to drink. I was on a Zoom call earlier this week who it was some folks that I'd spent a number of months journeying with as peace building, this peace building cohort. And it culminated in a trip to Northern Ireland to meet with some real live peacemakers and to get some training in peace building. Anyway, I had hoped to join some of this group a week ago in Minneapolis, but I was not able to get there and do that. And they were a part of the march of the clergy march a week ago Friday, the day before Alex Preddy was killed. And I recognize that not everyone on the call today is likely to agree with these efforts, but I think they illustrate some examples of how we tackle large issues like this that can be overwhelming. They reported on the peace work that is going on there. And interestingly, these marches are just a very small fraction. They're the part we see. one of the women is a pastor in Minneapolis there. She's an African American woman, and so her perspective is really, really interesting and helpful. But she talked about the many gifts and resources that were being used there. We could ask the question again, what is in your hand? She talked about singing as resistance. Of course, there's things like marches and sit-ins that we're familiar with. But there are people that are offering their housing in different parts of Minneapolis in sort of an underground network on behalf of immigrants to get them out of the really high tension neighborhoods and away from being targets. Those with white skin were collecting and driving and delivering food to places that were feeding refugees, that were feeding protesters. Some people were just being present in their neighborhoods, many that would take turns standing out and standing lookout in their 6 to 8 block area, accompanying people to their homes, finding out what their needs were, discovering that a lot of people were not coming out of their homes and were really in need. There's trauma counseling. There's conversation to folks who are cooped up and lonely. There was prayer and worship with the community, gathering across a lot of denominations and faith groups, as Jonathan was talking about. And things like just buying things at the immigrant-owned businesses that were having to shut down. And this group talked about walking down the street and the open sign would be on, but the door would be locked. And so knocking and going in and just buying food or buying some things that would help folks with their businesses. And that's just a small sampling of how people were doing things using everyday gifts like their funds, their homes, their cars, their presence, their time, and their voices to do something. None of those seem like really dramatic things that we have, but many of us have those very things. They were using the things that were in their hand. Probably the biggest resource they had was one another. Their small efforts were helping. And when lots of people do small things together, it becomes a big thing. So what could be done here to address the issues? Here in Indiana, I see that the state legislators passing some bills that will further marginalize folks in our state. How might we use our homes, our funds, our automobiles, our time, our prayer, our presence, and our privilege to support marginalized or threatened neighbors and to support those who are doing good work? What's on your mental list? What's in your hand as you think about this? Chip has a cat. I don't know how you use that, but there's got to be a way, right? I'm more likely to want to negotiate with God about finding another plan. God says, Shawn, those things that you have in your hand, they're not yours. They're mine. And I've entrusted them to you for my purposes. When we move to the New Testament, there are a couple of passages of scripture that I think shine even more light on this and help us. First Peter is written to believers who are exiles, sojourners, aliens throughout Asia Minor, both Jews and Gentiles. This is going to a group of people who are not all at home there where they are and maybe feel alienated. We're reminded in chapter 4 of First Peter of these words, starting with verse 10. Like good stewards of the manifold grace of God, serve one another with whatever gift each of you has received. Another way of saying that, what has God placed in your hand? Whoever speaks must do so as one speaking the very words of God. Whoever serves must do so with the strength that God supplies, so that God may be glorified in all things through Jesus Christ. To him belong the glory and the power forever and ever. Now, and it doesn't matter how insignificant the things seem that you have. Do them as unto God with strength, boldness, and as if it is God doing these things through us. Because, friends, that's what's happening. God is doing those things through us. This is part of the reason that we can act out of a sense of abundance. Often we're kind of scarce. We have a scarcity mindset. But God's love is so abundant, there is no need to be stingy with it. It doesn't mean when we love others that we get less love. When we love even our enemies, it doesn't take away the amount of love that God loves us with. God's love and grace are abundant, not scarce resources, and we don't rely on just our own strength. 2 Timothy 1, 6 and 7 says this: "For this reason, I remind you to rekindle the gift of God that is within you through the laying on of my hands." He's talking about Timothy's long heritage of faith and his own belief. "So I remind you, Timothy, to rekindle the gift of God that is within you through the laying on of my hands. For God did not give us a spirit of cowardice, but rather a spirit of power and of love and of self-discipline." I love that word, rekindle. One translation says, "For this reason, I remind you to fan into flame the gift God has given within you." That is one of the pictures that I think of Quakers all the time. I think of the image of an ember in us as those who are created by God, that of God in us that may just be an ember. But what can we do to fan that into a flame that bursts forth? It's a great image. Fan to flame those gifts that you have, however small you think they might be. We don't have to solve everything. We just need to be faithful. So, what's in your hand? That's not a question to inspire guilt somehow for you to somehow do more than you already are. But it's actually to kind of take the pressure off, to be reminded that we are called and gifted and that what we have is right in front of us. We have it. It's not something that we need to wait for, that we need to somehow conjure up, but it's there. What we have in our hands is enough. It's what God asks of us. So here are a couple of questions to think about today. Maybe as I can't remember now if there's some more silence. A little bit, but what gift do you have that can be fanned to flame? What is it in your hand? What resource? And that can be done as if it is God doing it through us. So I like those pictures. The things in our hands that can be fanned to flame and used, and that we do it in such a way that it's as if God is doing it through us. Some thoughts this morning.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you, Shawn. You've doubtless given us a great deal to think about this morning and going forward. We know that there are some that have to leave us for other obligations, but for those who can remain, we'll continue on in silent worship.
Thank you, Lynn and Shawn. So, kind of a record crowd this morning when you showed up, Shawn. Maybe you could come back more often. We're very fortunate to have a small group of very eloquent speakers in our small group.
Friends, if all hearts are clear, we can close meeting for worship this morning.
Thank you, Shawn.
Good to be